Alright guys, welcome back to the garage. Tuesday, November the 9th, and we are just about to start working on the 1981 Alfa Romeo Spider Veloce that we brought home in the previous video. Just a little bit of background on this car. I've owned this car since August of 2017, and we've done a little bit of work on it previously. There's a playlist on my channel if you want to see the initial walk around of the car and some of the initial work that we've done on this car. Yesterday's video I outlined the winter projects that we were going to be doing on this car. So here is the list if you did not watch yesterday's video. I'm not going to go through the entire list. You can pause it and have a look, but there are the projects that we're going to tackle in the next little while. A little bit about this car. As mentioned, I bought it in August 2017. I bought it from a buddy of mine who lived in Vancouver. I had it shipped by rail to me here in Toronto. It is a very original low mileage car. It has only got about 57,000 original kilometers on it. The car was bought from the original owner. What else can I say about it? It's kind of a striking color with this blue, this light blue with a tan interior and a tan top. I can't recall the exact Alpha designation for this color. I'll actually have to look it up in the trunk. There's a stamp on there, a tag on the trunk, inside of the trunk lid. So maybe I'll have a look at that and I'll come back and I'll tell you what the actual color of this car is. Anyway, we're going to get it up on jack stands and we're going to start the winter list projects by doing the exhaust first. And we'll take you for a quick underside inspection once we get it up on jack stands. Alright, I'm going to try to get a shot of the original paint tag on this car, and I can't really read it. Might be able to see it better in the camera once we download this, but here it is. I believe the color is something like Azuro. I think it means sky, and I think it's sky blue. And there is the paint code. I think it might be paint code 302, but again, I'll have to download this video and see if I can get a better view of it. Since it's kind of tucked under the edge of the backside of the trunk lid here, it's a little difficult for me to get in there and read, but there is the original paint tag. Alright guys, we've just been playing around a bit. We've got it up on jack stands where it needs to be, and I decided to put the top down. Well, it's still a little bit warm in the garage. These can be difficult to get down when it's cold out. So I put the top down. It'll be a little bit easier for me when I get to doing some of the interior work, not to have the top in the way. I did dig out the boot cover. It needs a bit of a cleaning, and it looks like it's missing a few of these clips, these plastic clips. I'm not really a big fan of those versus like the button style. But both power windows I was able to get down, so that's good. They are working. The switches need to probably be a little bit cleaned on the inside. The contacts are a little bit temperamental, let's say. So a little bit of switching back and forth and they actually work. So that just means that the contacts, I think, need to be cleaned within the switches, and that's sort of a common thing on these cars. Alright, so that is it for now. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to unpack this box and see what I've got to work with. And then we'll probably call it a night out here, and we'll get back out here tomorrow night. Let me unpack this box first. Alright, we've unboxed the parts we have to work with. So I've got a little bit of fuel line here. There's a 13 millimeter line, and the non-braided line is actually a 7.5 millimeter line. So we've got a little bit of line there to replace a section that I replaced temporarily when I did the rear fuel filter. So we'll do that first using that short section. We are going to replace all the fuel lines, but that is a good start. Here's the transmission mounts, or the rear engine mounts right there. These are soft or silent bushes for the exhaust hangers. Here are some gaskets for the exhausts themselves for the mid and rear section. And then way over here on the floor are the actual rear section and mid section from the catalytic converter back. So there they are. They look good, nice polished chrome tip coming out the back. So we'll endeavor to get that installed tomorrow. I do have the actual bolts, actually, that bolts up to the converter as well, I believe. And it's part of the package. And then I've got the other bolts for the other flange, so there's that as well. So we're good to go for tomorrow. Alright, we'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Alright, it's another day, and we are back on the 81 Alfa Romeo Spider project. I have started without you, and I just pulled off the rubber mounts for the exhaust system. Here's the rear rubber mount. the mid mount was actually missing the rubber, so this was the only thing left on the car. I'm not sure if I just threw that old rubber mount out when I removed the old exhaust. So we've got another rubber mount coming. I just wanted to take you to have a look at this hardware that's coming off and how nice it is. I mean, I bet you this is the original hardware for this car, and you can see how good the cadmium is even on these old fasteners. These are 40 years old and they look like brand new. So nice to work on a car that's much less rusty than what I'm used to working on. All right, let's get to work. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch gears here now that I've got those mounts off and now that I've got that one ordered and coming. Before I put the exhaust on, I have better access to the fuel lines at the rear of the car. So I think I'm going to switch gears and I'm going to switch out a couple of fuel lines that will be, like I said, easier to access. Once the exhaust is up, it's going to sort of cover off where I need to get to. So let's do some let's do some fuel lines first before we fit the rear of the exhaust.
All right, guys, we'll try to do a little filming under the car. Right at the rear of the car, here is the rear differential. And just right above that are the two lines for the fuel line that I need to exchange. One is the outlet and one is the return, I believe. So we've already changed the outlet line, but we want to put a correct line on there. So we're going to swap that out with the correct nylon braided line. And you can see the hanger up there for the fuel filter. For the stock fuel filter, which is a little larger than the replacement, so not sure if I'll be able to utilize that hanger or not, but we'll try to stick the filter up there maybe with a zip tie to keep it in place. But anyway, those are the first two lines that we are going to attack and exchange with new lines. So we'll do that now. Alright, we've removed the old line with the fuel filter, and the one good thing with Alfa is they actually run hard lines from the rear of the car all the way to the front, and they actually wrap those hard lines with rubber, so the interior fuel lines are in excellent condition, as you can probably see there. So all we need to do is run a short line with the filter from this line back up to that location, and then we need to swap out this line. That's a very short piece of line. The hard line basically starts here where you can see that join. That's a hard line, so it's just a really short piece of soft line with two clamps on it. So we'll replace that piece of soft line and then we'll be good to go.
Alright guys, it's a new day and we've just finished up the fuel lines underneath the car. So those are all renewed where they need to be, so I'm happy with that. I'll give you a quick shot of that a little bit later on when I'm back underneath the car. We're just moving now back to the exhaust, and if you recall, I was waiting for some new hangers, and those have arrived now, and I'm just matching them up to the old hangers, and I think those are going to work pretty darn well. And we're going to utilize the old hanging hardware, and I still can't get over how good this hardware is. But anyway, so we're just about to mount the front section to the catalytic converter on this car. So that apparently requires, according to the parts manual, it requires 2 gaskets at the catalytic converter. So we're going to add these 2 gaskets there, and then we'll work our way backwards towards the tailpipe section. So we're going to get started on that now, so back under the car.
Alright guys, just under the car, and we're making pretty good progress. We've got the midsection and the rear section of the exhaust installed, and we came across a little bit of an issue that bore further investigation, let's say. So right now the hanger is in the right place for both the front and rear exhaust. However, I've got a little bit of the problem with the drive shaft fouling just on the corner of the exhaust, so that means the exhaust needs to come over a little bit, like just a touch, probably half an inch or so. Now that, like I said, bore further investigation why it wasn't coming over, and I discovered that there's a mount up at the front here that I've removed from the car, and we'll show it to you in a second, that mounts just right here in this location. I think you can probably see it right there. So there's a mount that basically keeps this exhaust out here, and it uses the transmission bolts to fasten onto. Now I'm going to go up to the workbench. I've just taken that bracket off, and it looks like it's been mangled somewhat. As I'd mentioned, this car came to me by rail car, and I think what happened was the car ended up bottoming out and catching on the rail car, probably the ramps of the rail car, and ended up tearing off the existing exhaust that was on this car. That's why we needed to replace it. It was pretty old, and like I said, original to the car anyway. So I think in the process of ripping the exhaust off, it damaged this bracket, and like I said, I'll go up to the bench now and we'll give you a shot of that.
Okay, here's a look at that front exhaust mount, and these points here hook up to the bottom of the transmission case, and they're just bolted on. So these align with the bottom of the case. So you can see how bent that is. Now, I'm assuming this is supposed to be straight, and I'm assuming that this is supposed to be straight as well. So I'm just wondering though, if I straighten this, if these positions are still going to line up on the case. Obviously these bearings here are perished. I have new ones of those right there ready to go, but I'm assuming that this needs to be straightened out. So what was happening, since this is collapsed and bent, it wasn't pushing. This is the end that hooks up to the catalytic converter and sort of pushes that exhaust out to keep it away from the drive shaft. So you can see this is kind of shortened a little bit because it's been crimped here and here. So basically, if I straighten this out, it should give me enough length to move that out. So we're going to do a little bit of research on this and see if it should be straight. I'm assuming that it should. Again, the only concern I have is actually getting these points to align back on the transmission once I straighten this out. So let me do some research. Alright guys, we managed to straighten that bracket out, and we just got back under the car and made sure it still fits, and it does. So that's a good thing. We also straightened this bracket out. So it's not perfect, but it's much better than it was. So we're going to move on to the next step, which is going to be replacing these little rubber bushings with our brand new ones, and then we'll go back underneath the car and we'll put the bracket back on and see if that solves our clearance issue with the muffler hitting the drive shaft. It should. Stay tuned. All right, back in the garage Saturday morning, and we're back on trying to get these bushings out of this bracket to replace them with the new ones. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to make a quick trip over to Lynn's and use his press to get these out. They're proving to be a little bit difficult. So we'll do that. In the meantime, I'm going to play around with this filter, the air filter canister. Apparently the filters are very difficult to get for this car. And Doc, the potential new owner, has sent me some different types of filters to try and see if we can find something aftermarket to fit this canister. So I'm going to pull this filter off and have a look, and we'll compare it to some of the filters that Doc has sent along. Alright, there's the filter housing off the car, and that opens up quite a bit more of the engine bay, so you can have a bit of a look in here. So a little bit of cleaning while we're in here, but everything looks pretty good, just a little bit dirty. So I think what we'll probably end up doing too is taking the valve cover off, or the rocker cover off. Not sure what you call it in Italian, but we'll take that off and we'll try to clean this up a little bit and get some of this maybe polished up. So, but other than that, it looks pretty good. We'll check the engine mounts while we're there, make sure everything looks good there. It's amazing where they tuck things in. I think that's the wiper motor down there, so that could be a challenge to change out if required, but it's working perfectly, so we're all good to go there. Alright, so let's figure out what kind of filter is going to go into this box. Alright, we've just gone in the house and we've gone through the filters that were sent, and we found one that was fairly close, or the closest of the bunch that was sent anyway. It's fairly close as far as diameter is concerned. Obviously here is the stock original filter. This is a filter made by Baldwin, and as you can see the diameters are fairly close, but the length is a little bit too long on the Baldwin filter versus the stock. So I'm thinking of trying to modify this. I'm not sure if these end caps are just glued on here or whether they're actually welded on here, but I may be able to modify this to shorten it and I get that to work. I'd also have to do something with the other end. As you can see, it's a capped end on this end, and these ends are both open. So a little bit more modification required, but in the long run, if we can find something to use as an alternative to the stock filter, that will be good. I believe this stock filter was only used on 80 and 81 models that had this type of air box, so they are hard to find. Let's come up with a solution for that if we can, but fallback position is the stock filter is still usable. If you look at the airbox instructions, this filter needs to be changed every 30,000 miles. So this car has only 57,000 original kilometers, And I believe that's still under the 30,000 mile threshold if you do the conversion calculator. I can't do it in my head. I'd actually have to look it up. But anyway, stock filter is still usable, but it'd be nice to find something going forward for the future. So now that I've got that air box off and we've opened up the engine bay a little bit, like I said, this car has probably never been detailed and it's just been driven. So it's a little bit grimy in here. Still looks great though. Obviously original paint. I don't see any rust anywhere. So this would require just a good cleaning, and as per usual, I'll probably end up waxing in here as well just to keep the future grime down. So we'll clean up this area, and while we're there, I think what we'll do is we'll end up popping off the valve cover, and as mentioned, we'll get that polished up nicely, and maybe even do a little bit of painting on something like this going towards the throttle body or towards the plenum. This could probably go with a good coat of paint. I don't want to get too carried away, but we can clean up and detail this a little bit more nicely, that's for sure. So I think we'll do that while we can. Yeah, I'll give you one more general overview before we go too crazy and start disassembling things, so you can get a better before and after view. Original labeling down here. Pretty cool. Gotta like this embossed hose. Alright, we're just about to label the plug wires, so we'll go ahead and remove those. Alright guys, I have to get with the terminology. I guess we're going to call this a cam cover since this is a dual overhead cam. So let's call that the cam cover, not the valve cover or the rocker cover. So the cam cover is off on the floor, and we're just having a quick look at the top side. At the cams themselves, they look fantastic. Nice and clean in there. And it all looks good. Timing chains look great. Nice and tight. So yeah, I'm happy with that. So I guess what we'll do is we'll just cover this up with towels here temporarily, keep from anything falling in there, and we'll go to town on this cam cover and we'll get that cleaned up a little bit. All right, we are at the Rusty Beauty's shop, and just about to work on trying to push these bushings out. Let me squeeze behind this green monster here. So here's what we're trying to press in, and the brackets over there, and we'll come back when we get our setup. All right, we've got a sort of a setup here, and just a piece of pipe on a flat plate to give us clearance to push that through, and we're going to use the new rubber bushing to push the old one out. Hopefully that's the plan. So we'll see how this works once we get that. We'll come back in a half an hour once that ram comes down. Alright, let's see if this works without destroying anything. Oh, some movement.
Push a little bit more, I guess. Or,
no, it's pretty good actually. So I think that worked out okay. So let me see that. So there's the new bush installed, and it's level at the back. So we'll do the same on the other sides. That worked pretty well.
You have the other one, or is it on the table?
I do have the other one in my pocket.
Okay.
There we go. Which way is that way? Right. Real time. Beautiful. The benefits of having a press.
Thanks, Eugene.
Thanks, Eugene. Good job.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we've got the cam cover just wiped down with some Windex and paper towels to get some of the grime off. We're about to start working on it with this Mother's Mag and aluminum polish and see if we can get some of this to come up. Then we're going to break out the compounds and the buffing wheels to see if we can do a little bit better than that. So we'll see how things go. We'll see how aggressive we need to be. Some of the areas are going to be a little bit difficult to get off. I see some staining here, which will probably be a challenge to get off, but we'll see. We may have to get a little bit more aggressive with areas like that and then work our way back up as far as compounds and polishes are concerned. So let's give her a shot and we'll see how good we can get it. All right, guys, we spent about an hour on it so far with various steps of compounds and polishes and different buffing wheels, and I think that's looking much better compared to that. Hopefully you can see the difference in the camera. So I've done to basically here, halfway. So it's shining up pretty nicely. It's not perfect, but I'm not going for like super high gloss finish. I'm going for better than it was. So that is definitely better than it was. So we'll continue on. And got another about an hour, hour and a half to go. And we'll get that looking better, a little bit better anyway, and we'll get it put back on the car. And we'll start cleaning up the rest of the engine bay. All right, guys, we spent a couple hours out here. We're just going to shut it down for the night and go watch the rest of the hockey game. But I think it's looking pretty good. It's not super blingy. We did just want to clean it up, and it's, let's say it's lightly polished anyway. So that's going to look better in the engine bay, especially once we get the rest of the engine bay area detailed, as mentioned previously. All right, guys, we'll pick it up tomorrow. All right, guys, welcome back. It's now Sunday morning, and we're back on cleaning detail. Just going to town on the engine bay here, and we've just got this sprayed down with some soap and water. And we're just about to wipe this down, get that looking a little bit better. So yeah, the only plan for today really is to just continue on with the detailing, and I think we're going to put that exhaust bracket on that we pressed the new bushings in yesterday. So that's really the tasks for today. I'm not sure if we're going to get much further than that, but let's continue on. Get this looking all right, guys. Better. We're cleaning up the front of the engine a little bit, and we're doing that in order to get a little bit better access to the fan belt here. As you can see, the fan belt is on the way out. It's starting to thread there, so we're going to replace the fan belt. We have got a spare that Doc sent us. Doc sent us a couple spares, actually. And in the meantime, full disclosure, I'm going to be removing this air pump bracket. So it's this heavy, heavy bracket. This car originally would have run with an air pump, but it didn't come to me with the air pump, and a lot of people remove them because these air pumps are not repairable and you cannot find them anymore. So the air pump was part of the emission systems on this car, and I believe it just was used to recirculate gases back through the engine. And there used to be an air rail on the manifold, and you can see the sort of the bolts or the plugs at the top of the manifold here, where the air rails would have been. Now this is very similar to the later TR6s that I'm familiar with. They also had an air pump system that had air injected back through the manifold, and most people with TR6s have removed the air pumps as well, as again they're not serviceable and they're not available. So we're going to be removing this huge bracketry. There is a pulley here that used to have a separate belt to drive the air pump. We no longer need this. And we're going to remove this from the front of the engine. This probably weighs at least 20 pounds, I would say. So it's a pretty big, bulky item to remove from the front of the engine. It's not required. You'll never be able to put an air pump back on this car because you're not going to be able to find one anyway. And like I said, the previous owner had run without the air pump and had passed emissions testing no problem in Vancouver. So I'm sure we're not going to have any problem passing emission testing here. And the car will run better anyway. So we're going to try to remove these two studs that are remaining off the front of the block. If they don't come out, we'll just put the hardware back on and we'll be happy just to remove this big bracket. Well, it's definitely more difficult to change the alternator belt on a Alfa Romeo versus any Triumph I worked on. And this requires that you actually get under the car and loosen a bolt. So I've loosened the bolt at the top here. Actually, I've just removed the whole bracket from the top. And we're going to loosen the bolt from the bottom and then swing the alternator closer to the engine block to be able to loosen off the belt, and then we'll go inside, grab the new one, and get that installed. So maybe I'll take you a shot under the car and I'll show you the access to the bottom bolt. Hopefully it's not a through bolt and I don't have to have a wrench on both sides because the access is going to be limited. So hopefully it's just a one-sided bolt that goes into the block or into some sort of bracketry. We'll find out. All right, we're just under the nose of the car at the front of the engine, and you can just see the oil filter there, and above that lies the alternator, and you can see the bolt there that I need to loosen at least to be able to swing the alternator. So we're just going to undo that now, swing the alternator, exchange the belt, and then tighten it back up once we get the correct tension, and we'll be good to go for another 30,000-40,000 miles. All right, the belt is out, and it's definitely a good idea that we're changing this out. It's probably the original belt on this car, to be honest with you. So it's probably 40 years old. Anyway, it was a bit of a struggle to get it out. You like to compare the ease of jobs, Alfa versus TR, and maybe that's not the right thing to do. Definitely easier to change a belt on the TR versus the Alfa. Same sort of deal with the TR250, TR6. I'm not sure if it even goes back further to the TR4, but there's always a little bit of fan belt clearance issues with the, in this case, it's the bottom of the sway bar and the actual front cross member as well. It's a bit of a challenge to get this belt out from underneath there, so I just put a 2x6 across the bottom of the oil pan and just raised the engine a tad to be able to get the belt out, and then you got to sort of struggle to get it around the fan and the shroud, etc., before it comes out. So it's out, so we'll go inside, we'll get the new belt, we'll exchange that out. Again, difficulty level on the Alfa is a bit more difficult as far as moving the alternator is concerned. There's no need to get under the car when you're doing a TR, but there is for the Alfa. So it is what it is. All right, we've got our new fan belt here. This is from Centerline Alfa. It's a Continental belt. The actual Continental part number is here if you're looking for this. So there you go. So we'll compare the two belts to make sure they're the same size. They look to be the same size initially. And we'll install that new belt and we'll move on to something else. All right, the belt is on and it fits perfectly. We still need to install the bracketry and tighten it back down. Before we do that, I think what we're going to do is we're going to clean this fan a little bit to make that look a little less grungy before we go ahead and we put the shroud back on. And then we'll proceed back to putting the cam cover back on. We got better access now. We've got that bracketry off the front. We can actually access these two front cam cover bolts a little bit more easily. I was worried about having access to put those back on, but now with that bracketry gone, like I said, that opens up the front of the engine a little bit more, makes the belt changes a little bit easier, and some accessibility a little bit easier up the front of the engine. So all good there. All right, guys, we spent most of the day on the engine bay area, and we've just reassembled it pretty much temporarily. The air filter box has to come out. I haven't put the filter back in yet. I'm still looking for other options. I think I might have found another option. And I've got an opportunity now to, since I have the filter out of the box, I can actually measure the circumference and the length and see if I can find something that's going to be stock fitment before I go and modify the filter behind it. That's the secondary option. So we're still going to look for another filter option before we start chopping up the brand new Baldwin filter. So yeah, rocker cover, cam cover, whatever you want to call it, polished, and some painting done in this area, lots of cleaning done. That bracket removed in the front, which cleans things up quite a bit and gives us much more room. The cam cover bolts, for example, I could easily access with that pulley system and bracket out of the way. So I think that looks pretty good. Like, again, this is a 40-year-old Survivor. I think most of the items that I'm taking off this car are original to the car, like the fan belt, for example. So yeah, that's looking pretty good. So we'll do a bit more work in here. We'll probably exchange a few hoses, a few lower hoses. We've got a engine bay hose kit coming, so, and I believe we have some radiator hoses coming, so we'll probably exchange those in the future. So we'll be sort of going backwards a little bit on some of this stuff, but I wanted to get back together. I did clean under the hood as well. There was some dirt there, so I gave it a quick cleanup and a quick wax as well, so that's looking better under there. So that is pretty much it in this area. I still need to put that exhaust bracket on. It's still down there. So that'll be the next task to
All right,
do.
guys, back under the front of the car, and we now have the front exhaust hanger mounted. And there's what it looks like in its straightened configuration. And it is doing the exact job that it's supposed to. It's holding that exhaust out, and I no longer have any clearance issues here at the back with the drive shaft. You can see there, hopefully. Everything looks good. So we are good to go as far as the exhaust is concerned. And then we'll move on to another project. I think we're going to retorque the head.
And one quick shot of the rear tailpipe exit. It's looking good. Happy with that. So yeah, the exhaust is installed. All right, about to start the cylinder head torque on the 81 Alfa Romeo Spider. So I think the process is similar for most of the cars. The torque settings might be different, so check your torque settings for your appropriate year. The torque setting on this car is 65 foot-pounds, and some will argue that's fairly low. Some will actually go a little higher than that, but we're going to stick with the stock 65 pounds. I made a little bit of a notation here just so you can follow along. First thing they suggest that you do is you squeeze the radiator hose while the cap is off, and then as the radiator hose is squeezed, you refasten the cap. That is supposed to create a little bit of a vacuum, so it pulls the coolant out from running up the studs once you reduce the torque on the stud that you're working on. The studs are done in sequence, one by one, so you do one at a time. So I believe the manual calls for it to be done, I think, a turn and a half back. In this case, I'm going to be taking the nut entirely off. We're going to be lubing it with motor oil, the washer underneath with motor oil, and the actual threaded stud we're going to be lubing with oil. It has to be done in a specific sequence. The manual calls for it to be done in a spiral pattern. There's a couple different ways you can do it. I'm going to be doing it in this pattern here that I've marked out, so you can follow along when I do that. So, you know, 1, 2 in the center, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So that's the pattern I'll be using. And again, we want to make sure that we're torqued to 65 foot-pounds. I am going to do it in one pull. I'm not going to do it in multiple pulls. So it's done cold. I should probably mention that it's not on a hot engine, so this is completely cold. So I'm going to leave the camera on while we go ahead and do the process. I'm not going to be talking a lot, so I'll probably end up fast forwarding through and maybe move the camera over to the other side of the car, since this side is not really a great angle, but having you on the other side, you're kind of in the way. So we might switch you back and forth as far as sides of the car is concerned, so you can get a better view. All right, let's start the process. Okay, we're going to do the first part of the process, which is removing the radiator cap, which I've already done, to release any pressure that's in there. So what we need to do is we need to squeeze the radiator hose, and as we squeeze it, before we release it, we're going to tighten the cap back up. So we're just going to get the cap sort of aligned here to be able to do that. So we're in alignment there. Squeeze that hose, and we'll tighten that back down. And like I said, that's supposed to create a little bit of a vacuum to pull any fluid from escaping up through or wanting to come up through the studs once you remove the nut. So I'm not sure if that's valuable or not, but we're going to do it. That's suggested, so we'll do it. All right, on to the actual torquing. All right, here we go. You want to make sure you have a good torque wrench. I want to give a shout out to my sponsor, Wera tools, for providing me the torque wrench that I'm going to be using today. This is the Click Torque C3. This is a 30 to 146 foot-pound torque range. They're absolutely beautiful tools. So again, big shout out to Wera tools. I'll be happy to put this to good use today. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start the process working from the center out. I'll bring you back on probably 1 or 2 of these to show you exactly how I'm doing this. But we're going to follow the diagram as far as loosening these off and torquing them back up. Again, one at a time, and we're going to torque up to 65 foot-pounds. We are going to make sure we lube the actual stud before we do that. So we've just got some motor oil here, and we're just going to lube that stud. So here's the washer. Here's the washer under the stud. It has a flat side and a rounded side. It's kind of hard to show it in the camera. I'm going to make sure that we orient the flat side down. After we lube them, and again we're just lubing them with on both sides with a little bit of motor oil, and then we'll drop it back in place. So motor oil in place, and then oil in the stud. Back to our nut. We'll just tighten that down until we've got good resistance on it, then we'll switch to our torque wrench. And that's pretty much the process. So we'll just continue on, follow the process. On number 4, it's on this side. Alright, that is it for the cylinder head torque. So cross another thing off the list and move on to the next thing. Alright guys, I think we're going to wrap it up for the night, and I thought I would pull out our winter project list and see how we're doing. Some of the items we can cross off. Number 1, the exhaust installation is done, so we can cross that off. Number 2, the fuel lines have been done underneath the car. So we're going to cross this off temporarily with the understanding that there will still be some fuel lines to be exchanged in the engine bay and within the trunk as well. There's a couple kits coming for those. So that'll probably make the next list again for the engine bay and trunk, but we'll cross that off for now. When we wrote that down, we were talking about the lines under the car. The rear engine transmounts been done. The wheel bearings have yet to be done. The window track's still yet to be done. The quarter light lock's still yet to be done. Turn signal mechanism still yet to be done. The tires are later date as well. Head re-torque is done. Seat repair is still to be done. The fan belt has been done. We haven't looked at the speaker belt yet, but we can at least cross the fan belt off. And that's it for now. Reverse lights, hopefully it's just going to be an easy fix with the bulbs. That'll probably be what we look at next, is just that. We'll go after the easy fixes first. And that just requires the removal of the trunk carpet to get to the backs of the lights, to tip those out to check the bulbs. So we'll do that probably as our first job the next time we're out in the garage. And we'll probably have a look at the wheel bearings, see if we need to actually order new wheel bearings or whether we just need to repack the existing bearings and reset those. So those are the next couple jobs we'll do. Anyway, that's it for tonight, guys. Thanks for watching and subscribing. We will see you out here tomorrow after work.